Today we're going to discuss the scope and standards of practice for the nursing profession. We will define the scope and standards. We will discuss how they provide guidance to the nursing profession. We will review the value that the standards offer to both nurses and their patients, discuss the types of standards, and review the difference between the Nurse Practice Act and the American Nurses Association's scope and standards of practice. So first and foremost, what are the scope and standards of practice? The American Nurses Association has the responsibility of developing and revising the scope and standards of practice. The third edition recently was released in July of 2015. The purpose of the scope of practice is to outline the who, what, where, when, why, and how of nursing. The scope is variable, depending on the nurse's education, experience, role, and the patient population being served. The scope dictates what tasks our license will allow us to legally perform. For example, the scope of a BSN prepared nurse will vary greatly from the scope of an MSN prepared nurse. The standards of practice provide the framework and the roadmap for success in the career of nursing. They outline the essential duties all nurses are expected to perform competently. The scope and standards of practice provide nurses with direction and guidance in their career path. They set expectations and define responsibilities to ourselves, our patients, and our profession. The document outlines our legal obligations and should be reviewed periodically to maintain our focus. If you haven't read through them in a while, I'd recommend and encourage you to do so. You can find them on the American Nurses Association's website, which I have included on the slide. In addition, it might be an interesting opportunity for you to talk to your HR department and see if they happen to have a copy of the scope and standards available to the nursing staff. The standards of practice are invaluable assets to all of us. They provide us with the framework we need to do our job. They tell us how we should think and how we should act. Not only do the standards outline the expectations of a nurse, but they also provide us with a level of protection. We're clearly informed of what we are legally accountable for, as well as what tasks are outside our scope and should be avoided. The standards are also beneficial when we are developing our personal and professional goals. Perhaps you may want to consider reviewing your goals on a biannual basis and pick a standard to focus on for the upcoming 6-month period of time. Not only do nurses benefit from the scope and standards of practice, but so do our patients. The standards ensure the delivery of safe, quality care. Our patients can expect improved outcomes, individualized care plans utilizing evidence-based knowledge, and an interdisciplinary approach to their healing. The nurse will provide care in an effort to enhance and promote the self-care of the patient. There are 2 categories to the standards of professional nursing practice. The first is the standards of practice. These standards are required for a nurse to practice competently. They include the nursing process of assessment, diagnosis, outcome identification, planning, implementation, and evaluation. The second element consists of the standards of professional performance. The American Nurses Association states these standards are reflective of competent nurses' behavior in the professional role. They include the topics of ethics, education, evidence-based practice and research, quality of practice, communication, leadership, collaboration, professional practice evaluation, resource utilization, and environmental health. What is the difference between the Nurse Practice Act and the scope and standards of practice? Well, essentially, the Nurse Practice Act is a law, and the scope and standards are not. All states have enacted laws which are designed to protect the public's health and welfare. Each state has some form of a Nurse Practice Act. In some states, including our own in Michigan, nursing is incorporated into the Consolidated Practice Act or the Public Health Code. The Nurse Practice Act establishes the State Board of Nursing, which has the authority to govern the profession. The scope and standards of nursing practice are a fundamental component to the state's Nurse Practice Act. And this concludes my PowerPoint and discussion on the scope and standards of nursing practice. I hope you found the information valuable and you take a little bit of your time this week to review the scope and standards and how it affects your own practice.